Sounds good. Um, Welcome to the APIC Psychology Postdoctoral Applications Selection webinar. This is a webinar where the panelists and myself are presenting to you without the benefit of you being in a visible speaker pane and um, where you're not we can't see you and we can't hear you. So I just want to let you know that. We can, though, see Q&As in the Q&A section, and we can see if you raise your hand or not as well. And we'll have some time for those questions and for you to pop in with your questions and we'll try to provide our responses. There was another webinar earlier today that was also being recorded. And so the combination of folks you see to right now is just the randomness of how our schedules worked out for us to be presenting at this moment in the day. So without further ado, I'd like to present our two presenters, Dr. Wayne Siegel and Dr. Brad Roper. And was there something else regarding your introductions in terms of the slide there, Wayne, or do I tell them a little bit about you?
Just from the moderator notes and just a little blurb about kind of our positions. And we can
Okay,
fill in if you don't have it handy.
okay, yes, I need to pull those up. So actually, I think,
So I can do me a little bit and then Brad can
okay,
do his and you can say a little bit more about you. So Wayne
okay.
Siegel, I am chair of the APIC postdoctoral committee and been doing it for about a decade or a little bit longer now. I am formerly the training director at the Minneapolis VA for their internship and postdoctoral programs. I retired about a year ago. Now I'm doing a small private practice, doing some consulting, and doing some volunteer work for APIC, APA, and a couple other organizations. Brad?
Yes, I'm Brad Roper. I'm a neuropsychologist working both in a private practice, but my day job is also at the Memphis VA Medical Center, or the Lieutenant Colonel Luke Weathers Jr. VA Medical Center. I established a neuropsychology postdoc here a good number of years ago. Currently, I'm in a supervisor and employee supervisory role. And then I've been active in training primarily related to neuropsychology, but also have a great interest in general psychology training and postdoctoral training as well.
And I'll just say a little bit about who I am. I'm Dr. Sam Wan. I'm at the San Francisco VA healthcare system. I've been the training director for our postdoctoral program for over 10 years and also a clinical supervisor as well. And now, having spent a little bit of time on our APIC postdoc committee, involved in this committee work with Wayne and Brad. All right.
Okay,
Um,
well,
just a
yeah,
little kind of introduction before you get started, Brad. So
Uh-huh.
we're Brad and I are gonna go through the slides. It'll take about 40 to 45 minutes or so, and then we'll have roughly 25 to 30 minutes of to answer your questions. You can type any questions into the Q&A. Don't use the raise your hand feature because it will be complicated to be able to kind of mute and unmute people to be able to do that. So you type your questions in, you can type them in at any time. We will respond to them verbally at the end. If there are some simple questions, Sam may respond. If it's a simple kind of answer to that in the live context. And then we are recording, and this will be up on the website in a couple days. So if you kind of miss part of it or have to leave early, or you have a colleague who would like this information but couldn't attend, they can then watch that video. So with that, to Dr. Roper.
okay, well, the first thing to acknowledge as psychologist is go ahead and do the next slide. We're going to have a little mindfulness moment here. Take a deep breath. Many of you you're within the beginning or maybe halfway through, but just beginning of internship and applying to postdoc already. applying to postdoc is stressful. Many approach this webinar with heightened anxiety, but you don't have to sit around and do a meditation session for 20 minutes. Let's just do one breath. All right, take a deep breath. The goal of this webinar is to provide education and background on the postdoctoral selection process from start to finish. The process of applying for postdoc is very different than internship and often less stressful in some ways. You survived internship selection, and our goal is for you to leave today with some tools to be successful in applying and securing a postdoctoral fellowship. We'll start out with an overall overview of postdoctoral training. First thing to say is it's different from internship. Internship is a required component if you want to earn your doctoral degree. Postdoctoral training is not required for your degree, and in many states, approximately 17 at the last count, it is not required for licensure. Formal postdoctoral training is not required anywhere. There is not a match or uniform selection process for postdocs. However, APIC and the APIC Postdoctoral Committee have been working to organize application and selection processes for many years now. We will discuss this in detail later, but APIC has developed the postdoctoral selection standards with the common hold date. These standards are voluntary, but will guide postdoctoral selection and recruitment for many programs and trainees. How is neuropsych different? For neuropsychology, there is a national matching system sponsored by APSIN, or the Association of Postdoctoral Programs in Clinical Neuropsychology. However, not all programs participate. Many of the programs that do not participate may make offers earlier than the APSIN rank order list deadline. If you're considering neuropsychology programs, make sure you understand whether or not each program participates in the APSIN match, and if not, what their timeline is regarding interviews and offers. We recommend reviewing the neuropsychology applicant timeline document on the APIC website. We also highly recommend receiving mentorship through the application and selection process. Some more things, how postdoc is different from internship. There are a wide range of postdoctoral training opportunities. At the postdoctoral level, you'll note that most training opportunities are not APA accredited or belong to APIC. This means that these programs have not undergone external review, which may be completely okay. There are a lot of excellent training opportunities at the postdoctoral level that are not APA accredited or APIC member programs. And it will be important to evaluate what is right for you to ensure your training goals are met and ensure a program is one of quality and that fellows are treated fairly and with respect. Above, the Silberbogen et al. Article 2018 is an article that highlights factors to consider when deciding whether a postdoctoral position versus a program may be right for you. Good news, there is a significant imbalance favoring postdoctoral applicants. So there are way more available, there are many more postdoctoral positions available than there are applicants to fill them. In other words, it's a buyer's market, and that is good news for applicants. What is the purpose of postdoctoral training? If it's not necessarily required for licensure, if it's not required for the doctoral degree, well, that purpose is varied over time. Could be research skill development, development of advanced clinical skills, and or hours for licensure. Internships are considered broad in general, but the purpose of postdoctoral training is for advanced or specialized training within a focus area or a specialty practice area. Postdoctoral training may be required to market yourself for a particular type of position or as required for a specialty. Postdoctoral training also provides opportunity for professional growth and development and access to experiences that may be novel or that you may have had less exposure to as an internship or practicum student, including, for example, the provision of supervision, program administration, or program development or evaluation. Next slide. Post-internship experiences. So there are a variety of post-internship experiences available. There are APIC member and APA accredited programs with guarantees regarding it being a training year, or in the case of neuropsych, 2 years, including didactic, clinical hours, supervision, and a trainee-centric perspective. These are generally clinically focused. They can be up to 50% research, although the majority likely have closer to 20 to 25% research time. These programs also exist without APA accreditation or APIC membership and can be equally as programmatic or can be substantially looser in terms of whether training it's really training versus kind of employment, for example, with private practices. There's also a variety of research focused programs available, with many allowing for clinical hour accrual, including NIH T32 or F awards, OAA advanced fellowships through the VA. They're 2 years, 75% research focused, or being hired on as a project manager or in some capacity to work on a funded grant. Next slide. So how do you know if you need a postdoc? Well, thinking about career paths is important. Practicing in a recognized specialty area like neuropsychology, health psychology, rehabilitation psychology, among others, often requires formal postdoctoral training. It is recommended that applicants become familiar with the formal education and training standards for the specialty they're interested in, as well as the requirements to become board certified in that area later on. Trainees who are interested in launching a research career typically complete a postdoctoral fellowship to develop more focused research competencies. For example, manuscript development, grant writing. Fellowships may increase your competitiveness for academic positions as they provide more focused time for developing a line of independent research. More in a few slides about considerations for research positions. Postdoctoral programs ideally also provide specialized or advanced training in recognized specialties or focused areas, as well as critical mentorship and professional development opportunities. Such advanced or specialized training may help you secure jobs in those areas. With the exception of recognized specialty areas, see the question above, completing a postdoc may be an advantage, but not be absolutely critical for certain career paths. That's why it's important to seek guidance and mentorship from individuals in career paths of potential interest and seek out resources to make well-informed decisions. Neither APA accreditation nor APIC member postdoc fellowships are required for licensure. External review of a program by APA or APIC may confer some confidence about the site and the training they offer. Additionally, in many jurisdictions, the licensure application process can be faster, easier, more certain to be successful if you've completed an APA accredited and or APIC member internship and postdoc program. And if you choose not to do a postdoc, but then move to a state that requires one for licensure, you may find yourself doing a postdoc later in your career. What are the benefits of formal training as opposed to accrual of postdoctoral hours? First off, it's a structured program with guarantees. You have direct clinical hours. It's a primarily experiential type of training. You have formal supervision. You can gain exposure to a broad range of experiences that map onto professional activities. You also may have a substantial peer cohort, people going through the program with you. You'll have opportunities for mentorship and professional development and leadership in a formal training experience. And you also can have opportunities for networking. It also facilitates board certification. And there is the potential for increased mobility with your licensure to have that formal training. So many or all of the above benefits can be negotiated for in informal training positions as well. Next slide. Research focused positions. So there's the issue of accruing hours for licensure. Many training directors of research program fellowships in behavioral science should be familiar with applicants asking questions about the ability to get hours for licensure. As long as you make it clear that your main interest is in research training, asking if or how others who completed the program did obtain hours for licensure is considered acceptable. Research programs may be more difficult to find out about as they are often based on the availability of grant funding. The NIH Reporter is a great resource to identify those doing research in your clinical content area. Once you identify principal investigators, you can reach out to them by email, send them an updated or edited CV that highlights your research accomplishments. So how to be competitive for a research postdoc? Having clear research interests in a CV that reflects some publications in that particular area are important. Although not necessary, it is impressive if you've been able to obtain funding for yourself. For example, a small pilot project, a small foundation grant, travel awards to conferences to present research. The fit between your research interests and experiences and those of the prospective mentor is typically the most important factor. It's sort of the art of the particular in seeking research postdocs. Next slide.
Whoops.
No, international, that's good.
Yep.
International postdoc sites and applicants. There are opportunities for international students, though not all programs or institutions will be available to international students. So it's important to review program public materials or brochures, websites carefully, and also check with a training director if it's not clear. There are some postdoctoral experiences internationally and in the UK and Canada, though none are listed in the APICS UPPD, the postdoctoral directory. This could change as programs are added all the time. At this point, we're not aware of any directories or international postdoctoral programs in psychology, a single place you could go to find those, given the differences internationally about how psychology and education and training are accomplished in those other jurisdictions. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Siegel.
Yes, we're going to talk about kind of resources. So how can you learn more about the postdoctoral selection process? So this slide is really just kind of an overview of what the different resources are. We're going to talk about them in detail a little bit more. So the first thing to know is if you go to the APIC website, the headings on the very top, one of them says postdocs. If you click on that, it will open up a menu with lots of different links similar to what you're going to see on this page. But if you just click on that top menu, it will bring you to the APIC postdoctoral page, which is long. There's tons of information about all of these different resources. And so recommending that if people have not looked, become familiar with those resources. The first one, and Brad had mentioned earlier, is the Universal Psychology Postdoctoral Directory. The directory was born out of the 2016 Postdoctoral Summit, sponsored by APIC and APA. And that summit was geared around trying to provide some organization to postdoctoral selection, which was considered to be very kind of haphazard, and there was no formal kind of process or structure to it at that point. The biggest problem that we identified is there is not one central resource to learn about postdoctoral programs. The APIC directory does have APIC member postdoctoral programs, but that only represented a small fraction of the complete universe of programs. So the UPPD, if you've not looked at it, this is going to be the main resource to learn about postdoctoral programs. It may not contain every postdoctoral program, but we're getting pretty close. There's about 1,900 listings in there now. And then the postdoctoral selection standards and common hold date. There's a link to that. And basically the standards are kind of the rules, they're voluntary rules to help provide structure to programs and applicants. They are not hard and fast rules. Like APIC has very clear rules around the match about what you can do, what you can't do. Violation of those rules for programs and for applicants can have legal or other type of consequences because there's a firm written agreement that people adhere to that. The selection standards are voluntary. Roughly about 87% of programs opt to follow the standards. And so there are some programs that do not do that. And we're going to talk about how do you manage when some programs are following the standards, some people aren't. We've also developed communication templates. And these templates are hyperlinked through the standards document, but you can also look at them freestanding on that page. And basically, there's suggestions of what you might want to include as you're communicating with programs about positions at any point through the timeline, whether you're just inquiring about positions, whether you want to hold a position, accept it, whether you're releasing a program and withdrawing your application. And so taking a look at those. I'm assuming that most people in this webinar are aware of Postdoc News because this is probably how you learned about this webinar. But this is the APIC mailing list that is really where all the information that you're going to get in terms of kind of updates from now through late winter about postdoctoral selection. So if you've not signed up, please do that. There is also a PowerPoint. A couple of people have asked in the chat about slides already. And so this webinar, the recording will be available on the website, but not the slides. But these slides that are listed here on the selection are more inclusive, more comprehensive. And so you can look at those. They're divided into 3 different presentations so that you can kind of find more. It'd be easier to find what you're actually looking for. And then we have selection timelines. I'm going to provide an example later, but these are set up for applicants applying to clinical programs, to neuropsych programs, to research programs. And then there are parallel timelines for program directors. And the timelines give you a good sense of what should you be doing at this point in time. And so now that we're just into October, what should you be thinking about? And I think this helps alleviate some of the stress that Brad was talking about earlier. And my recommendation is it's hard to think about this entire process and learning what you need to learn to know, what you need to know, learning about the programs that you want, developing preferences, taking what's in front of you right now. And so learning about the programs that you want to apply to and developing kind of your preference or a preliminary ranking list is really what is important. And so the timelines help you give a sense of what do you need to be focused on now and what do you not need to be focused on now, you focus on later. We also developed a spreadsheet or tracking document that has a lot of the variables that we believe are important or that applicants would be useful for them in considering programs. As Brad mentioned earlier, postdoctoral programs may have different application processes, they require different documents, they may have different timelines. And so keeping all of that information straight across what program does what, this spreadsheet can help you do that. It's maybe overly inclusive. You can edit it, pare it down for your needs or whatever. So it's just a resource that's available to help you through the process. Here's a snapshot of the UPPD in terms of the search fields. If we have time at the end, I will do a short demo of that. But it's fairly self-explanatory. New for last year, we developed what we call elements of quality training. And Brad talked earlier about programs that are not APA accredited or APIC member programs. There's some excellent training opportunities, and there's probably some horrible training opportunities, and there's some in between. And so how do you know? Well, because it's not been externally reviewed, it's really hard to know what is a good program, what isn't a good program. My slides are jumping around on me without. So what we did is we asked programs to self-attest, and I'll say, because that word is important, self-attest. So we're not we're not reviewing them that they actually meet those, but programs are saying, yes, these are the elements that I missed that my program provides or offers. These elements parallel, not completely, but close APIC membership criteria and APA accreditation criteria. And so the point here is to try and make it very salient to you as applicants. These are the things that are important in a postdoctoral program. And if you're applying to a program or considering a program that is not APIC or APA, you should be asking about these, trying to find out whether these things met. If many of these are missing, I would buyer beware of that particular program. So a little bit more about the Universal Directory, Universal UPPD. There's about 1,900 listings in there. Listings are not reviewed. Anybody can post in there, and we don't look at the quality. There's just no way to be able to do that with the resources that are available. But programs that are APA accredited, APIC member, they have some markers of quality. So those that are not, and they're flagged. So if a program is not APA or APIC, there's a yellow flag that will pop up in your search results, letting you know that this program has not been externally reviewed. And you can search by a whole range of factors, from the type of setting, the type of program, specialty area, focused area, geography, institutional setting, etc. So play around with that. There's probably many different ways. You'll do several different types of searches to find the programs that you're most interested in or that are a good fit for you. There we go. So this is just a snapshot of the selection standards. They're on the APICS website, and I will show you at the end, if we have time, actually a demonstration of that. And the same thing, a snapshot of the communication templates. Again, they are hyperlinked through the standards. So as you're reading through the standards and a relevant communication template, you can click and it will bring you right to that particular template. Within the main page of the template, there's this menu at top, and then it will bring you down to the particular aspect that you're looking for. And these templates exist for you as applicants, but also for programs. Here's an example of the timeline that I had mentioned for an applicant to clinical programs. And as you can see, the beginning of internship, and then this is what you should be doing in September. And then here's what you should be doing in October. If you've not done the September things, you're probably not too late at this point, but you don't have to worry about November, December, January, February at this point. And that's what I mean, focus on what's in front of you. Here's an example, just a very truncated example of that spreadsheet that I was talking about, and highly recommend that people kind of use this. And then back to Brad talking about the application process.
All right. I was hip deep in responding to questions, so let me find my place here. So essentially, there's a number of considerations pertaining to application. One of them is dissertation status and plans. Clinical and research programs generally will not allow an ABD, all but dissertation student, to begin a postdoc, as they're not yet postdoctoral. For those licensing jurisdictions that have regulations about postdoctoral hours or time accrued, these may not begin counting those hours until the degree is conferred. So consider carefully your ability to make progress on her dissertation prior to the conclusion of the internship year. And I know that during the application process, you may need to provide updates to those programs you're applying to in terms of, well, have you defended your proposal? Is your data collection complete, etc. That can be very helpful for them because they may not want to hire you if they're not sure that that you are on track to complete that. Although with interviews, well, let me back up a little bit. That in terms of the number of applications, when we look at how many programs folks are applying to, the mode is 8, but there's a great amount of variability. That can be influenced by geographic factors, by the specificity of the type of program that you're looking for, by the amount, how competitive those programs are. I know that's a very common question, and the answer is it kind of depends. And I would encourage talking to people who are also going through the application process with you to get an idea of what they're doing, and certainly seek out input from your mentors on what's realistic in terms of the number of applications. Timelines. Information on programs is typically available in early fall, so we are there. We should be getting into that. You should be able to find the brochures and things online. Deadlines to apply typically fall between December and January. It can vary quite widely. Some of them I've seen are edging into November a little bit. But the large bulk of them are in December and January. Those may be quite variable. If they're research positions, they may have some funding that they have to secure, make sure they've got funding for that. So that is something that will be a consideration if you're looking at research positions. Again, a reminder to review the timeline documents that we have on the APIC website that kind of walk through things. Again, there's general clinical applicant, a timeline for that. There's a timeline for neuropsychology postdoctoral programs, and there's a timeline for research programs. Interviews, they typically occur in late January and early February, but again, they can vary. They can be in December. APIC, we are strongly recommending virtual interviews, but there are variations in how interviews are done. It's really up to the individual programs. And if you can't find that in their public materials online, it's certainly okay to ask. And be sure to connect with current postdocs who are at these programs to get an idea. I think it's very helpful for the training directors to make available their current postdocs. And if they do that, you can certainly take your questions to them in terms of what's the timeline, how do interviews work, etc. We don't really have hard data on how many applications will maximize the likelihood that you get a postdoc. Like I said, we do know that modal number is around 8, and like I said, it can vary quite a bit. All right, next slide. Okay, considerations when applying to different types of positions. So this is where things, well, they're tricky before, but they can get even more tricky. So there may be some conflicts between the timelines of different things that you're trying to do. So predominantly research focused programs, they may not be aware of or follow the APIC selection standards. This can be most challenging when research programs or potential jobs are making very early offers and not allowing applicants to hold the offers until the common hold date that we'll discuss later. We recommend being frank with programs about the time frame for other programs you're interested in as you go through the application process. And we also recommend talking with your graduate and internship mentors to advise you through this process. Throughout my time as a training director, this is a very common thing where people have this kind of bird in the hand, if you will, of a program that has made an early offer, and they're sort of weighing, what should I do? So certainly seek out guidance from those around you. And again, look back at those timeline documents for the three different types of applicants: clinical neuropsychology, and research applicants. We also recommend to be clear and transparent in your communication with all parties involved throughout the process. It's important to be aware that accepting a postdoc position and later reneging on that commitment to accept a non-postdoctoral position is considered unprofessional, and it could be something that's remembered in the future. All right, next slide. Considerations when applying. So you should be prepared. You have multiple focus areas or tracks within a program. It's definitely okay to apply to multiple focus areas and tracks if they have a variety of those. But make sure that you have a strong argument for how your fit is for each one of those tracks. A focus area or track at my internship site. So seek consultation if you're in an internship like that. Seek consultation from your training director. Talk with supervisors. It's really it really kind of puts yourself in a bit of a position. You're taking on multiple roles if you're applying within the same site as your internship. Now, the staff often are used to this. The training director is used to this, but you may not be as comfortable with that. So ideally, your internship and postdoc training director will talk about this with you so that you can find out if there's a preference given to internal applicants or how consideration of internal applicants may affect timeframes. Talk with your supervisors. If you're applying internally to a postdoc, acknowledge any discomfort or awkwardness of applying for a position at your current site. It can feel like a 6-month interview. Hopefully your supervisors are also raising these issues, and it may feel uncomfortable if you're not applying for a position at your existing sites. You may have reasons to not apply to those positions. We recommend being open about discussing these with your supervisors. And also be aware that you may be essentially competing with your classmates who are also likely your internship support network. So just acknowledging the discomfort of competing for positions is important, especially if there's an imbalance. So you could have situations where there are more trainees than there are positions, and that's sort of the reality of that situation. You should also be aware that as an internal applicant, you may not be selected, and then you may be faced with essentially completing the remainder of your internship following not being selected there or being rejected. All right, next slide. Application materials. Programs differ in their requirements, but most require a CV, transcripts, a letter of interest demonstrating fit, what your interests are, what you're seeking, and letters of recommendation. Some will require de-identified work samples. Some training directors have started asking applicants to submit a copy of their APPE, their internship application. Check the program website or with the training director for their particular application materials. We certainly recommend that you get feedback from supervisors or your training director at your internship site to see if they're willing to review your application materials and provide you with some feedback. Since programs may have different application requirements and timelines, like Wayne said, it's recommended that you use a spreadsheet to track what programs require, track the important dates. We've got the sample spreadsheet available, developed by our postdoc committee. And remember, it's a buyer's market. So let them rule you out. Don't rule yourself out prematurely when you want to be considered for a postdoc. There will be similarities to internship cover letters in that you should address fit with the specific postdoc program. For a postdoc cover letter, you're kind of striking a balance between describing both what you want to learn, something that's often really strongly emphasized in internship cover letters, and also what you'll bring to the table, what you'll contribute. Some may have specific instructions, so you want to review program brochures specifically as to what needs to be in those letters. There's no standardized reference form as there is for internship. Programs may require different types of letters, but most want at minimum a letter from internship and a letter from graduate school, perhaps even a letter from your dissertation chair verifying that you are on track to defend your dissertation. So the APICAS, that is the APIC Psychology Postdoctoral Application. It's a standard online application. It is free for programs and applicants. It's important to note that not all programs are using this application process. So check with the UPPD and a program's web page for instructions on how to apply to their program specifically. If they're using the APICAS, they will definitely say that. If they and if you can also check through the APICAS portal to see if that program is listed. It's important to keep in mind that the base application needs to be completed in APICAS in order to see what programs are listed. APICAS is very different and not as detailed as the internship API. But overall, the consensus is that applying for fellowship is easier than applying for internship. So that's good, but it can sort of drag down and feel less organized than the internship. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Wayne to talk about selection standards.
I'm going to kind of talk about just highlight principles of the selection standards. So probably the most important one is programs. There is no specific date by which programs are supposed to make offers or where they can't make offers. So anytime after they complete interviews, they can make an offer. And they can make as many offers as they have positions available. So if it's one position available, they can make one. If it's three, they can make three. Offers are considered binding until 10 a.m. on the common hold date, February 23rd of 2026. So if you were made an offer by, say, your second-rate program, and you want to hold it if the program is following the standards, you can hold it until that common hold date. After you accept an offer, the program should immediately then notify other applicants. For a declined offer, the program then would extend an offer to its next ranked applicant. And then programs can periodically check in with applicants who are holding an offer. So if you get from your second ranked program or lower, you're holding it, the program may reach out to you, once a week or whatever, just, hey, how's it going? There's a communication template that we suggest programs use. They should not be pressuring you to make an offer, to make a decision earlier than the common hold date, but just to make sure that you're still interested. And that is really the intent of that. And then from the applicant side is applicants, when you get an offer, you need to acknowledge that by email within 24 hours. If you don't, that offer will then be made to the next applicant on the list. So during selection season, you need to kind of be aware, have your phone available, and not be in a situation where you are unable to respond. An applicant can accept or decline an offer at any point or hold it. If they hold it, they can only hold one offer at a time. So as soon as you get an offer, you're holding it, you would then contact all of your lower ranked programs and release them and tell them you're holding an offer and you're withdrawing your application. The same thing if you're holding an offer and then you get an offer from a higher ranked program, which is not your number one, you're going to hold that higher ranked program. Then you need to notify the lower ranked program you were holding and let them know. And this is kind and thoughtful, professional for programs so that they can kind of manage and their selection and offer process. But you're also being kind and thoughtful to your fellow applicants, because as you release these lower ranked programs, it then allows those programs to make offers so that your kind of colleagues or other fellow applicants can then get offers that they're waiting for. If you're holding a program, if you're holding like a lower ranked program, you can also check in with higher ranked programs. And then want to stress, there are communication templates for all of this. So if you're wondering like, well, what can I say or how should I say it? The templates really kind of spell that out. You don't have to use them verbatim, but basically the general content is there and you can tweak them according to what works for you in your own language. And then when you accept a postdoctoral program, you would immediately withdraw from all other programs that you may be holding or that are lower on your list. And then the rationale for the selection standards. We believe that the system is kind of complicated, but it allows for a more flexible and fluid process that benefits both applicants and programs with less time pressure on a specific date. Some of you may be aware that several years ago, we had a different system called the selection guidelines, and it had a uniform notification date. And that worked really well for a while, and then maybe it didn't work as well, and we shifted to this other system. So the standards allow for ongoing communication between applicants and programs. You can reach out to programs. Where do they stand? Programs can reach out to you. There aren't those rules that are around internship selection where you can't communicate anything about standing or ask anything about that. So for example, if you are inquiring, you're holding an offer for a lower ranked program on your list, and you're interested in a higher ranked program, you can reach out to that program and you can ask them where they stand in their process. And you can also ask, where do you stand in their ranking? They may not be able or willing to tell you that, but you can ask, and some programs will tell you that maybe you're lower on the list, and that could be good information for you to have as you're making decisions. We believe the whole process allows applicants to make the most informed decision possible. There are situations, particularly when there are programs you're applying to that are not following the standards, where you may not have all the information that you need in terms of being able to make a decision, but it's better than the prior system. This new system tends to disrupt the creep of programs going earlier and earlier. I'll acknowledge the process is still way too early. Here you are just figuring out internship and you're busy applying to postdoctoral programs. And this is a burden for postdoctoral programs, which also have internship programs, many of them. And so they're trying to manage these selection processes at the same time. And then overall, we're trying to foster more organization, continuity to the entire postdoctoral selection process. So how do you know if a program is following the standards? In the UPPD, there's a field, are you following the standards? The program will indicate yes, no. There are also categories for neuro programs and research programs that are considered exempt from the standards. And so they're exempt, which is different than a program who's choosing not to follow the standards, where they could follow them, but they're choosing not to. What if a program doesn't know about the standards or they're not following them? You can inform them, you can refer them to the APIC website, you could even refer them to me or other members of the postdoctoral committee. And then how do you handle it if some programs you're applying to are following the standards and others are not? This is not an uncommon problem. And so the challenge that you may get yourself into is, when are people going to be making offers, and when are they going to allow you to, how long would they allow you to hold those offers? And so if you're applying to programs that are not following the standards, I would ask questions about when are they willing to make decisions? When are they going to be making offers? Do they have like a policy on length of holding offers and things like that? That can be information that can all help you kind of make the decisions that you will need to in terms of programs that you or offers that you're accepting. How do programs usually contact applicants for a position? Email is probably preferred. Phone calls happen as well. As you're applying to programs and interviewing, I would ask them about this, is how are they planning on doing that? And when are they planning on doing that? And how long can you hold an offer? If it's a program that is following the standards, you can hold the offer until that common hold date, which is the 23rd of February. If it's a program not following the standards, they may allow you to hold the program for an hour or weeks. And so you can ask what it is that you are kind of wanting. They may be able to grant that or not. And then if you don't accept an offer right away and hold it, and you eventually end up at that program, are they going to view you negatively because you didn't accept their offer right away? No guarantees, but the vast majority of training directors, they understand the pressure that you're under. They understand that you may not be their number one choice, and they're okay with that. Of course, they would prefer that you accept it right away, but typically they're not going to hold this against you, so I would not worry about that. And then common questions. Is there a reciprocal offer process to the standards? The answer is no. The reason why we have this up there is the prior process 4+ years ago had a reciprocal offer in it. So that does not exist. Some programs still think there might be or whatever, but there is no reciprocal offer. Can I check in with programs where I've applied if kind of you're holding an offer and you want to check in with a program that is preferred for you? Yes, you may reach out to hiring programs to get more information. There's a communication template instructing you how to do that, language that you might want to use. How do you request to hold a position? Or what do you do when you request to hold a position? As I noted before, you immediately want to release all the lower ranked programs. Applicants will often tell me that they're reluctant to do this because they want to keep options available to them. First of all, it's against the rules, and you're tying up the system, and you're hurting your fellow applicants and these programs by doing that. So you do need to notify those other programs, lower ranked programs, when you're holding an offer. When you accept a position, first of all, congratulate yourself and celebrate, and then immediately notify all lower ranked programs that you've accepted a program. And again, this is to the benefit of those programs and to your fellow applicants. What do you do if you don't have a position on the common hold date? And I think there was a question in the chat about this. So take a deep breath. There are many good positions available. As Brad mentioned earlier, there are many more postdoctoral positions than applicants. Roughly, about 30% of all postdoctoral positions go unfilled every year. So there will be positions available. On the common hold date, we will open up the UPPD for programs that have not filled their positions to list those positions in the UPPD. And then there will be a search field that's currently hidden that will be opened up on the UPD where applicants can then search for open positions. Sometimes it takes 1 or 2 or 3 days for programs to kind of catch their breath and list those positions, but that can be a good way to find positions afterwards, and there are plenty available. Are offers binding? Yes. When you accept a position, it's considered a binding professional agreement. Brad mentioned this before. If you renege on a position, barring extreme personal circumstances, and that usually isn't like maybe a relationship ending, it has to do with like grave illness in family or things like that in yourself or family, programs will understand if you need to withdraw from a position that you accepted. But to withdraw from a position you accepted for a job, for what you think is a better postdoc position or other position, this will come back to haunt you in significant ways. So do not do that. Are programs and applicants required to use the communication templates? No, they are there for suggestions as a resource. Highly recommend looking at them, at least for kind of content and ideas. And we think that they're very useful, and that's the feedback that we've gotten as well. Um, what if a program does not allow me to hold an offer to the common hold date? Well, if it's a program not following the standards, that's within their purview. They can do that. And usually that's why they have chosen not to follow the standards. If it's a program following the standards, you're in a bit of a bind because the program is violating the rules of this. You can certainly discuss this with the program. You could reach out to me or other members of the postdoctoral committee. With your consent, I have reached out to programs and had discussions. I realize that places the applicant in a bind. This can be a difficult situation, but get some guidance or advice on how to handle this. And chances are, if a program is going back on what they publicly advertised, if they said they're following the standards and now they've decided not to, maybe you want to think about whether that's a great fit for you to begin with. This brief demonstration of the UPPD we will get to if we have time. And then best of luck to everybody. And we're gonna head to the Q&A, but I will hand it back to Sam for instructions on that.
Thank you. And we have several questions, so we'll jump right into them. Some of them have been answered over our chat here, but there might be some worth repeating for everyone's sake. But there are a couple there are several we wanted to answer live. So some are very specific to neuropsychology, so I wanted to make sure that Brad had a chance to weigh in on those. And another one has to do with Apicast in particular around creating accounts and applications. So I'll start with the one around in a cover letter, and this relates to Minnesota versus Houston guidelines in neuropsychology. Which do you suggest we reference if we would like to ensure the appropriate standards are in place?
That's a great question. And I want to give people some context about where we are with the Minnesota guidelines. The conference itself occurred in September of 2022, but the delegates didn't approve the guidelines until earlier this year. As you know, the guidelines themselves have been published, and there's currently like 3 companion articles. There's a planning commission article, an implementation article, and I believe a controversies article that are being published. And those are not going to come out until next February in TCN. So essentially, to view the Minnesota guidelines, anytime a new guideline comes out, it takes a while for training programs to adjust to those. And I know APSN as an organization is looking at the guidelines and saying, this looks like a lot of what we already do. So what I've said before is that the Minnesota guidelines are competency based. Houston Conference guidelines happened before the competency movement happened, and so they were very generic. And so they are more similar than they are different. It's still a 2-year, postdoc. And 2, I say that, the Minnesota guidelines, one way to view them is they put flesh on the bones of Houston Conference in terms of what are the specific competencies and their elements we're looking at. But I don't want to minimize that the guidelines themselves were controversial, and they went through a lot of revision after the conference, a lot of virtual meetings of the delegates. So I would suggest that postdoc applicants to neuropsych programs say, my training is consistent with Houston Conference guidelines as it is. Getting in the weeds at this point related to Minnesota guidelines, I don't think that is that helpful because we are so early in the process of looking at them, and they are aspirational. Whenever you create new guidelines, it's not like these standards everybody has to meet immediately. It's understood that, hey, let's get together and let's look at how we can satisfy these guidelines.
Good answer. Thank you.
Okay. There's a couple of ones here. So I don't know if either of you know about Epicast. There's a question about creating a new account for Epicast, regardless of the fact that I have an APIC account. What I'm wondering is if folks have created their internship profile. And then when they go to begin to apply to postdocs, they're wondering, do I need to restart that or can I reuse that?
Right. So I can answer that question. So the systems are developed by the same company, but they don't talk to each other. So you would need to create a new Apicas account. And then I would say is if you have technical questions within the Apicas portal, there's a link to the help desk and phone number to call about like specific questions that you may have. And I don't want to provide any like more information because it may not be accurate.
And also, are you meaning to present a black screen? Link?
I am not, and let me fix that. Thank you.
Somebody had asked, so we have answered that one. And we answered that one regarding the Apicas account. Are the APIC common hold date and the APIC or absent, I'm going to say, match date synonymous?
No, they are two very different processes. In fact, if you're applying to just neuropsych programs, then you really don't have to worry about the selection standards and the common hold date. You need to be aware if you're applying to APSIN programs of what the APSIN kind of match submission list is and withdraw dates. But both would not apply unless you're applying to both neuro programs and clinically focused programs, which would be highly unusual.
And I would add, just I'm looking actually as we speak, the National Matching Service administers the APSIN match as they administer the internship match through APIC. But they're separate sections, so it's important to be on the APSIN match, the neuropsych postdoc match, and they have set their rank order list deadline at February 11th, 2026. So you can go and you can see their entire schedule of dates there. And Wayne, what is the common hold date?
It is the 23rd of September 2026. I'm sorry, of February.
Yes. So it's after this year. It's after the APSIN rank order list deadline, and so that's the time that applicants to neuropsych programs through APSIN, that is a commitment when you turn your rank order list in. That means if you match to a program, you are obligated to take that to accept that position.
And you have signed a legal document like with the internship match that says that you will accept that position.
I'm going to collapse two of them, specifically around APA accreditation, membership with APIC, and non-membership. So the first question was, what is more highly regarded, being a member of APIC or being APA accredited? But there's also a question, are there drawbacks of accepting a non-APA accredited position?
I can maybe take a stab initially. So I'm not going to say which one is better. What I will say is getting APA accredited is a more lengthy process where a program has to create a self-study, submit it for review, and then there's a site visit. So people actually go to that site and review to make sure what they're saying is accurate. APIC membership, and there's a lot of overlap between the criteria. APIC membership is a paper review. In fact, APIC, if you are an APA accredited program, APIC doesn't review you as a program. They automatically assume that you meet all of APIC's criteria because of that kind of overlap, and they believe that you've already been reviewed. So I think both are good quality markers for postdoctoral programs. I don't know that I would provide this great differentiation between the two. For internship, going to a non-APA accredited internship, there can be very significant consequences later in your career. It can be harder to get licensed in many states and jurisdictions. There are many institutions, such as the federal government and the VA, that will not allow you to work if you did not do an APA accredited internship. That is not the case with postdoc, okay? So APA accreditation for postdoc, it's a marker of quality, and those are probably good or decent programs, but there's not going to be this, it's not going to interfere with your career in some negative way. The same way that we said, if you go to a postdoc program that is non-APIC and non-APA, there's some really good programs, but there are also some that are very problematic or whatever. And so, yeah, I will end there.
And
And
another way to say that is postdoc accreditation is not as popular, if you will, as internship accreditation in order to really be recognized as a good program. And a lot of that can have to do with whether the agency requires the facility to become accredited. So you'll see in the VA, most of the VA, if not almost all, unless they're new, most of the VA postdocs are accredited because that's required of the federal government.
are there any drawbacks you'd like to highlight of accepting a it specifies APA accredited position?
Not really. I mean, if an APA accredited postdoc is, it may be a little easier to go through a verification process for licensure. For certain jobs or institutions, you have to get credentialed within certain medical centers or hospitals or other agencies, and APA accreditation may make that go a little bit easier. But usually it is not a big problem if it's not APA accredited. So what I have told my interns in the past year after year is it really does not matter. The biggest factor, it has to do about, do you know that this is a quality program? But the fact that they don't have APA accreditation usually is not like a huge thing. Whereas if somebody were to suggest that they're going to go to a non-APA accredited internship, I would counsel them very, very strongly against that.
Okay, now there's two questions about what's considered rolling or rolling basis. One is about programs that have a deadline in December, but also application deadline in December, but state that application review is rolling. So the question is, when do you recommend submitting by? But the other side is, if this site says they're on a rolling basis for filling positions, and they also follow the APIC standards, how does that work together? So the first question is really about rolling application. Is there a suggested application timeline to submit by, other than the deadline? And then if they're filling positions on a rolling basis, but they say they follow the standards, how does that work?
I'll give that a shot. So if they say that it's rolling, I would submit your materials as soon as you can without like rushing and putting together a sloppy material. But one of the biggest challenges with that is getting your letter writers to get letters in on time. Rolling admission for a postdoctoral program usually means once they find an applicant that they really like, they're going to make an offer to that. Okay. I don't know that this question has come up before, but a rolling admission process is inconsistent with the selection standards. So it's not possible for a program to do rolling admission and following the standards, because the cardinal rule of the selection standards is being able to hold an offer until the common hold date. So I would ask the program about that. Now, it's possible that what they may intend is to do is say on December 31st, they get an applicant, hopefully it's whoever answered this question, asked the question, and they make them an offer and you want to hold it, and that they will allow you to hold it until the common hold date. I seriously doubt that would be the case if they're doing rolling admission, but I would ask them about that. And certainly they could reach out to myself or the postdoc committee to try and get clarification on what that all means. And my guess is the program isn't trying to do anything bad. They're just maybe a little confused on the process.
Thank you. There are a couple of very specific questions, but I did want to return to this earlier question about number of applications to submit. Brad, you covered this a bit. It sounds like there's some concern about an optimal number of applications. We did provide a modal number based on our surveys, but could either of you address that? Maybe Brad, take that one more time.
Yeah, I'm more familiar with the neuropsych side, and this is old information, but years ago we found what the outcomes were for the absent match, and it actually was the case that if you get 8 interviews, based on a logistic regression model we set up, that was, you had like a 90% chance of matching. Now, I think it's actually a better chance now than it used to be. There are at least twice as many absent member programs as back when I was president. But, I think that there is a rule of diminishing returns that, if you apply to, I know people who've applied to 40 postdoc positions. So, in this case, it may be helpful to get feedback from your mentors, your supervisors, because there are obviously applicants that are popular with just about all programs, and then there are applicants that may be less popular. So, in terms of kind of setting that based on your particular application, your mentors may be able to give you some feedback on, hey, how strong do I look? Just ask them, how strong do I look? Ask your training director, see this application package, how strong do your internship trainers, how strong does this look to you?
I
Are
think
there
that's
any
great. Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Sam. Go ahead.
Just because we're very limited on time, there's 3 other questions. I was just going to move ahead. Okay, so there was one question about consideration for applicants applying to rehab psychology. That was
Yeah, I'm a little bit out of the loop with the specifics of rehab. I know Bill Stiers and others have put together, they've talked about maybe it being a 2-year experience, but I don't have a great sense of what the competitive landscape is for rehab currently.
So rehab, there is a small number of rehab programs. It's a pretty small world. Um, um, and chances are people are applying to all of those small number of programs. Now, what I would say in general, answer to the prior question is don't apply to programs that you don't want to go. Okay. If it's in a city area of the country that you don't want to go, don't apply. And then you also want to think about how competitive those programs are, but also thinking about, remember, there's this imbalance. So if you're getting an interview for a position, chances are programs are interviewing 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 people per position as compared to internship, where that ratio is so much higher. So you are considerably more competitive, and think about that as you're considering kind of the numbers. Specific about rehab, I believe Quinn Kellerman is still the president of 38 Rehab. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
And reaching out, and she could probably give you some good specific guidance around that specialty.
APA Division 38.
Yes.
us to squeeze in under the wire. What do you suggest applicants do if sites offer both virtual and in-person interviews?
That's a hard one. APIC is recommending virtual interviews. And when sites offer both, there's probably a little pressure on the applicant to go in person, feeling that that's going to give them kind of a leg up. I would communicate with the program and ask that. If it's not feasible for you to interview in person, I would let them know. And like, do they give preference for in person? Now, some programs may tell you they're doing that solely for your benefit as an applicant, where some applicants want to come out and see the site that they're interested in. But that's a challenging, and again, it depends on your personal situation. Do you have the resources and time to be able to interview in person if the site is willing to do that? But also know this is really against APIC's recommendation.
And last, this was probably what one of you might have answered around letter writing. Somebody was applying to both, or considering both clinical and or research positions. And there was a message, sort of interest around what are the best letters to send to those different kinds of applications.
So programs will probably in their application materials tell you they want X number of letters, and they may specify they want a letter or more than one letter from specific people or roles in your training. So programs may tell you exactly what it is that they're wanting. If there is not that level of specificity, you want to think about what is this program? So if it's a research program and you don't provide a letter from someone who knows your research really well, that program is not going to think highly of your application. And the same is true as if you're applying to a straight clinical position and you provide 2 letters from research mentors. That program is going to think that you're not that interested in clinical work. So again, the program may specify, but also think about what is that program and what picture of yourself are you trying to paint in your application, and the letters that you submit are part of that to that program. And that may differ to the different programs that you're applying to, which is again different than internship, where it's like the letters are the same and there are.
Yeah, and I wanted to jump in, and since it's to make sure that for the record, the recording is corrected, that the Division of Rehabilitation Psychology is not 38, it's 22. So Wayne and I were both wrong about that. So I just want to make sure that that's clear and corrected. Related to letters, I can also add that every postdoc program you apply to, regardless of whether it's research or clinical, they're going to want some assurance that you're going to graduate. So if your program doesn't require a dissertation, they want to know, however, that all of your requirements for the doctoral degree are being satisfied. And so that's why I think some input from the doctoral program is important.
Okay, well,
And some programs may specify they want some type of letter from your dissertation chair or department chair that you've met all requirements for the degree in order to start postdoc.
DCT as well, yeah, sometimes.
Okay, thank you folks for hanging on. I think we've taken a stab at every question, whether live or through typing an answer. But that concludes our webinar on the postdoctoral application and selection process. Thank you very much for hanging in there with us and participating. We hope it has been helpful. There will be a recording of this webinar available on the APIC postdoc webinar webpage in a couple of days. And there are lots of resources, including the communication template, the tracking spreadsheet, and the slides as well. Lots of people were interested in getting these slides and also recordings. So thank you again for being here, and we wish you well.
Thank you all, and feel to reach out if you have questions later that you need answered.
Take another deep breath if you need to.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the names of people on this committee are also on the website if you would like to reach out to people directly with questions. Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.